In the small town of Quitman in central Arkansas, home to fewer than 800 residents, most people make a living through agriculture and small-scale crafts. Life moves at an unhurried pace, yet just north of the town center, at 65 Mulberry Street, stands an old Victorian house. Its yard has long been overtaken by weeds. Waist-high wild grass hides the broken stone steps. A rusted fence leans crookedly, and a few strands of withered vines hang from it, adding to the sense of desolation and unease. At night, no one is willing to go near the house, not because a fire ever occurred there, nor because anyone is known to have died inside. There are not even any official records indicating that the building poses a safety hazard. Still, locals instinctively detour when they approach that street, even if it means adding more than 10 extra minutes to their walk. Stories about the old house have circulated in the town for over 40 years. The details vary, but they all point to the same name, the Dog Boy. Some say that late at night, you can hear low, guttural barking coming from inside the house, mixed with faint, intermittent whimpering. It doesn't sound like an ordinary dog, but carries a desperate, piercing quality that feels especially jarring in the silence of the night. Others claim they have seen a dark figure moving through the yard under the moonlight, walking on all fours, tall in stature, yet moving with the agility of a wild animal. Its eyes, they say, glow a ghostly green, standing out vividly in the darkness. Still others insist that when they pass near the house, their own dogs become frantic, straining violently at their leashes, throats rumbling with low growls, as if something inside the old house triggers a deep instinctive fear. These rumors cling to the house like creeping vines, growing more entrenched with time, casting an inescapable aura of terror over an already decaying structure. Few people know that behind these seemingly absurd legends lies a story that is both real and brutal. The central figure of that story was named Gerald Floyd Bettis, born in 1954 to an ordinary family in Quitman. The Bettises did not have a child until middle age. Floyd was already 42 and Aline 39 when their only son was born. To this long-awaited child, they devoted all of their affection and indulgence. In an era of material scarcity, most children in town wore patched clothes and ate simple, coarse food. Gerald, however, almost always got whatever he wanted. When he was 7, he set his sights on an expensive BB gun at a shop in the county seat. At the time, the family savings were just enough to cover the cost of farm seeds. Floyd did not hesitate. He walked 20 kilometers to the county seat overnight and spent half a month's wages to buy the gun. When Gerald was 10, he became extremely picky, eating only ham and chocolate. Aline would get up before dawn every day and walk 5 kilometers to the town's grocery store just to buy ham and chocolate for him. Meanwhile, she and her husband often survived on dry cornbread and pickles. This bottomless indulgence shaped Gerald into a deeply self-centered child. He grew accustomed to doing whatever he pleased and never learned to respect others. In his mind, anything he wanted had to be his. Anything he disliked could be destroyed at will. As he grew older, Gerald reached a height of 193 centimeters and weighed over 136 kilograms. His shoulders were broad, his arms thick like tree trunks. His massive frame made him stand out in any crowd. Yet in stark contrast to his imposing physique, his personality was sensitive and withdrawn. At school, his towering height and timid nature made him a target for bullying by other students. The other children would secretly stuff dead rats into his school bag, cover his textbooks with crude, mocking doodles, and give him humiliating nicknames like Stupid Pig and Monster. Once, several older students cornered him in the woods behind the school, took his lunch money, shoved him into the mud, and pressed a foot into his back, forcing him to bark like a dog. Curled up in the mud, Gerald listened to the shrill laughter around him. Humiliation and rage burned in his chest like fire. Yet he dared not fight back. He was afraid he couldn't beat them, and even more afraid that resisting would bring even more vicious retaliation. The bullying did not teach Gerald to become stronger. Instead, it caused him to redirect the anger and helplessness inside him toward lives even weaker than his own. Gerald was only 10 years old the first time he abused an animal. That evening, just after a light rain, the air was damp and stifling. Near a pile of firewood in the corner of the yard, he discovered a stray cat. The cat was skin and bones, with an injured hind leg, curled up in a gap between the logs. staring at Gerald with wary yet helpless eyes. Gerald stood there watching for a moment when a sudden, inexplicable impulse rose within him. Instead of trying to feed the cat like other children might, he slowly crouched down and extended his hand, pretending to stroke its head. The cat hesitated, then gently brushed against his fingertips, as if seeking a bit of warmth. At that instant, Gerald suddenly clenched his fist and slammed it down on the cat's head. The cat let out a piercing scream, its body convulsing as it tried to flee. But Gerald pinned it down by the neck. He could feel the animal struggling desperately beneath his palm, warm blood smearing onto his hand. The sensation of controlling a living creature filled him with an excitement he had never felt before. It was a pleasure he had never experienced at school, a twisted satisfaction born from causing pain to another while gaining fulfillment himself. From that point on, abusing animals became his hidden obsession, a secret known only to him. From then on, the number of stray cats and dogs in the town began to dwindle. Some people claimed they had seen Gerald at dusk, carrying a black cloth sack, wandering through the woods at the edge of town. He would use sausages as bait to lure stray dogs closer, then suddenly throw the sack over them, hoist them onto his shoulder, and carry them home. Neighbors were often jolted awake late at night by piercing animal screams coming from the direction of the Bettis house. Sounds that came in broken bursts, mixed with the thudding of wooden boards, the scrape of metal wire, and Gerald's low, harsh shouts, sending a chill down anyone's spine. Mrs. Jones, who lived next door to the Bettis family, was once awakened late at night by a stretch of relentless barking. The sound was filled with desperation and left her unable to fall back asleep. She quietly walked to the window and peered through a gap in the curtains, where she saw a faint light glowing from the Bettis house's sunroom. Inside, she could vaguely make out a tall figure moving back and forth. Early the next morning, she saw Gerald leave the house carrying a heavy black plastic bag. He walked to the roadside trash bin and threw the bag inside. Driven by curiosity, Mrs. Jones stepped closer and glanced into the bin, where a furry tail was sticking out of the bag. Terrified, she immediately ran back to her house. For several nights in a row afterward, Mrs. Jones continued to hear miserable dog howls in the middle of the night. Finally, she worked up the courage to knock on the Bettis family's door, intending to tactfully remind Mr. and Mrs. Floyd to keep their dog under control and not let it bark so badly. But it was Gerald who opened the door. His eyes were dark, and a faint, cold smirk hung at the corner of his mouth. After Mrs. Jones explained why she was there, Gerald replied in a flat, icy tone, "What happens in my house is none of your business." At that moment, the stench of decay and blood coming from Gerald made Mrs. Jones feel nauseated. Faced with his towering body and vicious stare, the elderly woman took a few steps back in fear and dared not ask anything more. And the Bettis couple were not completely unaware of their son's behavior. While cleaning his room, they had once found animal remains hidden under Gerald's bed, and late at night they too had heard the agonized cries of animals. But Floyd would always sigh and say, "He's just a child. He'll be fine when he grows up." Aline chose silence. She felt sorry for the bullying her son endured at school and believed his actions were merely a way to vent his emotions. She even defended him in private, saying, "He's just too lonely. He doesn't have any friends to play with." Their parents' indulgence acted like a catalyst, allowing Gerald's twisted behavior to grow increasingly unchecked. To better conceal his crimes, Gerald began modifying the house. Using money he earned from odd jobs on farms, he carved out a cramped space in the attic, sealing it off with thick wooden boards secured tightly with nails, creating a hidden cage. The enclosure was less than 2 square meters in size and only about 1.5 meters high. The floor was covered with a layer of tattered straw. It was dark and damp, filled with the smell of mold and animal waste. He locked the animals he captured inside and tortured them in various brutal ways. Sometimes he bound their limbs to wooden boards with wire, leaving them unable to move. Sometimes he slowly scalded their skin with boiling water, taking pleasure in their screams. At times, he even skinned them alive, watching as they died in agony. Even more horrifying, he would crudely preserve the dead animals. Gerald carefully peeled off their hides with a knife, dried them in the sun, and then hung them on the walls of his room. He smashed their skulls, pulled out the teeth, strung them together with cord, and wore them as necklaces. He also glued animal claws onto wooden boards, turning them into decorations displayed on the bedside table. Gerald's room was perpetually filled with a nauseating mix of blood, rot, and formaldehyde. The walls were covered with animal hides and bones, making the space look like a gruesome trophy room. When his parents tried to stop him, he would become extremely volatile, often smashing objects in the room and even threatening to attack them. Once, while Gerald was out, Aline secretly threw away the animal hides from his room. When Gerald returned and discovered what she had done, he flew into a rage on the spot, overturning all the tables and chairs in the house. He pointed at Aline's face and roared, "You dare touch my things? If you ever do it again, I won't go easy on you." Watching their son's face grow more and more unfamiliar, the Bettis couple felt both terrified and helpless and could only allow him to do as he pleased. Those animals he had imprisoned thus became the first victims of Gerald's need for control. As Gerald grew older, his desire for dominance intensified, and animals were no longer enough to satisfy him. He began to turn his attention toward his own parents. By then, the Bettises were already in their 60s, their bodies steadily weakening. Floyd suffered from severe arthritis and needed a cane to walk, each step accompanied by intense pain. Aline had high blood pressure and heart disease. Even slight exertion left her gasping for breath, dizzy and lightheaded. Faced with their son's massive build and increasingly volatile temper, they were utterly powerless. Gerald began restricting his parents' freedom, forbidding them to leave the house at will, and even preventing them from speaking with neighbors. He set strict rules for when they had to wake up, eat, and sleep. Every movement had to follow his orders. Any disobedience was met with harsh punishment. To tighten his control even further, Gerald moved his parents' bedroom to the attic, the same cramped space where he had once imprisoned animals, now turned into their prison. The attic windows were nailed shut with wooden boards, leaving only a narrow crack for air. The space was dark and damp, still carrying the lingering stench of decaying remains. Gerald delivered food and water to the attic only once a day, and even then in pitiful amounts, usually a single slice of cold bread and a cup of cloudy tap water. Sometimes he would even forget to bring them that much. Each time Gerald placed the food at the attic door, he would quietly watch as his parents devoured it in desperation. A satisfied smile would spread across his face. The feeling of holding their lives in his hands filled him with pleasure. If he noticed any resistance or complaints, they were beaten. Gerald would punch his father in the back and shoulders, kick his mother in the legs, and sometimes even fling scalding hot food onto them. One time, driven by unbearable hunger, Floyd struggled down from the attic while Gerald was out buying groceries, hoping to find something to eat in the kitchen. Leaning on his cane, he descended the stairs step by step, moving with extreme caution, afraid of making any noise that might alert Gerald. Just as he opened the cupboard and reached for some crackers inside, he heard the sound of a key turning in the door. Gerald had returned. Floyd began to tremble uncontrollably and tried to crawl back up to the attic, but it was already too late. When Gerald saw Floyd in the kitchen, his eyes instantly turned vicious. Without a word, he grabbed Floyd by the collar and dragged him to a second-floor window as if he were lifting a chicken. Floyd struggled desperately, begging over and over, "Gerald, please let me go. I was just too hungry." But Gerald showed no mercy. With a violent flick of his wrist, Floyd's frail body flew out the window like a kite with its string cut. The second floor was less than 6 meters high, but below lay hard concrete. Floyd's back slammed heavily into the ground, the dull impact accompanied by the sharp crack of breaking bones, piercing the quiet afternoon. In the end, Floyd lay curled on the ground, his limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Blood poured from his mouth, soaking the front of his old shirt, his eyes wide open, frozen with the last traces of terror and unwillingness. At that moment, Mr. Smith, who lived in the house diagonally across the street, was mowing his lawn. The loud crash startled him so badly that the garden shears slipped from his hands and fell to the ground. He looked up and saw Gerald leaning coldly against the window, glancing down at his father on the ground before slowly pulling the curtain shut. Mr. Smith felt a chill run through his entire body. He scrambled back into his house and dialed the police, his voice shaking so badly it was almost incoherent. "Officer, please come to 65 Mulberry Street. the elderly man at the Bettis house. He's been pushed down. By the time the police arrived in the small town, Gerald was sitting in the living room, wiping down a rusty hunting knife. Dark brown stains still clung to the blade. When the officers forced their way in, he didn't even look up, only remarking casually, "He fell on his own. The old man's legs don't work well." But he insisted on climbing the stairs. Near the second-floor window, police found fresh scratch marks. A few drops of blood on the floor had not yet dried and were an exact match for Floyd's blood type. Gerald, however, refused to admit anything, insisting that the marks were left when his father fell. By the time Floyd was rushed to the town clinic, he had already fallen into a deep coma. Doctors diagnosed 3 broken ribs, a compression fracture of the spine, and severe intracranial bleeding. Emergency treatment continued through the entire night, but they were ultimately unable to save the elderly man's life. Before he died, he clutched a nurse's hand, murmuring repeatedly, his eyes fixed on the doorway of the ward as if terrified of something. Meanwhile, Gerald sat on a bench in the clinic hallway, chewing on a sandwich, not a trace of grief on his face. Floyd's death was initially ruled an accidental fall, though everyone in the town knew the truth. Braver than most, Mrs. Jones secretly told the police what she had seen, but without direct evidence, the conclusion could not be changed. At her husband's funeral, Aline remained silent throughout, dressed in a black dress so washed out it had turned pale. Her eyes were hollow like stagnant water. Gerald stood beside her with his hands in his pockets, occasionally glancing at his watch impatiently, as if the funeral were nothing more than an inconvenient obligation. After her husband's death, Gerald's abuse of Aline grew even worse. He replaced the attic lock with a heavier security lock, keeping the key hanging around his neck day and night, gripping it even in his sleep. The straw in the attic had long since turned moldy and black, crawling with maggots. When rain leaked through the roof, shallow puddles would form on the floor, icy cold. Aline's high blood pressure and heart disease worsened. She often struggled to breathe suddenly in the middle of the night, lacking even the strength to get up and call for help. All she could do was lie on the freezing floor, listening to her own ragged breathing, waiting for a dawn that might never come. Later, Gerald stopped bringing food regularly. Sometimes 2 or 3 days would pass before he tossed her a piece of dry, rock-hard bread. Once, unbearably thirsty, Aline crawled over to lick rainwater seeping from the wall, only to be discovered by Gerald. He planted his foot on her back, the heel of his leather shoe digging deep into her shoulder blade, and snarled, "You're only fit to eat garbage, and you still dare to dream of drinking water?" Aline's screams were swallowed by the thick wooden boards, heard only by a few startled rats that scurried away along the wall corners. In the spring of 1983, an anonymous tip was slipped into the mailbox of Adult Protective Services. The envelope was made of brown craft paper, the handwriting messy and trembling. It read, "The old woman at 65 Mulberry Street is about to starve to death. She's locked in the attic, covered in injuries. Please, you have to save her." At the bottom was a small cross drawn as a signature. Only later did people learn that the letter had been written by Mrs. Jones. She had endured it for 8 long years, watching Aline decline from a sharp and energetic elderly woman into a frail, hollow shell. Finally, late one night, while her husband slept, she slipped out and secretly mailed the desperate plea at the post office near the edge of town. When the agency's social worker, Linda Cole, arrived with an intern named Mark Davis, Gerald was blocking the doorway, studying them with a dark, hostile stare. "My mother isn't well," he said. "She's not fit to see anyone." Linda noticed the dark brown stains on Gerald's cuffs. When she stepped closer, she caught a smell mixed with mold and rot, which only strengthened her resolve to investigate. "Under the Arkansas Adult Protective Services Act, we have the right to conduct a welfare check on an adult suspected of being abused," Linda said firmly. "If you refuse to cooperate, we will contact the police and proceed by force." Faced with the 2 workers' unyielding expressions, Gerald finally backed down. Reluctantly, he let them into the house. The moment they stepped inside, Mark instinctively covered his nose. The living room was piled with trash. Empty liquor bottles and moldy food scraps were scattered across the floor. The sofa cushions had long since turned black, exposing yellowed stuffing beneath. The walls were covered in irregular dark brown stains, later confirmed to be dried blood. Linda climbed the narrow staircase toward the attic. The lock on the attic door was heavily rusted, yet showed clear signs of frequent recent use. When Linda asked Gerald to open the door, he claimed the key was lost. Only when Linda reached for her badge did he reluctantly pull a ring of keys from his pocket. The moment the attic door swung open, a cold gust of air rushed out, carrying a stench of mold, sweat, and decay. Aline was curled up on a pile of straw in the corner, wrapped in a tattered blanket. Her clothes clung in rags to her skin, and her exposed arms and legs were covered in overlapping old and new injuries. Some were deep purple bruises, others gashes so deep bone was visible. Some wounds had already festered, crawling with tiny maggots. Her hair was matted into knots, caked with dust and grime. Her cheeks were sunken, her eye sockets hollow. Her weight had dropped to less than 38 kilograms, and she looked like a corpse on the verge of decomposition. Linda immediately called for an ambulance and contacted the police to launch a formal investigation into Gerald. During their search of the house, police uncovered a shocking secret in the sunroom Gerald had built. 56 thriving marijuana plants were neatly arranged alongside professional lighting and irrigation equipment. Plastic bags used for drug packaging and digital scales were scattered across the floor. Appraisals later determined the marijuana had a street value of approximately $32,000, clearly indicating that Gerald had been engaged in long-term illegal drug trafficking. Beneath the attic floor, police also dug up more than a dozen black plastic bags filled with animal bones and hides. They included remains of dogs, cats, rabbits, squirrels, and even a fox. The bones bore marks of wire strangulation, burn scars, and violent fractures. Forensic examiners conducted detailed analyses of the remains and found that some of the injuries dated back as far as 10 years. On several bones, traces of human saliva and bite marks were discovered. DNA testing confirmed a complete match with Gerald. This meant that he had not only abused animals, but had also engaged in the grotesque act of biting and gnawing on their corpses. With careful medical treatment and psychological counseling at the hospital, Aline gradually regained consciousness and finally found the courage to tell the whole truth. She told police that Gerald had begun abusing animals at the age of 10, the first time he threw a neighbor's kitten into boiling water, watching it scream and struggle while a sick excitement spread across his face. Later, his violence slowly turned toward his family, starting with verbal abuse and shoving, escalating to punching and kicking, and eventually developing into imprisonment and starvation as punishment. "He's a demon," Aline said, her voice trembling. "Floyd and I lived in fear every single day. We wanted to escape, but there was nowhere to run." In 1984, Gerald was formally charged with multiple crimes, including elder abuse, illegal cultivation of marijuana, and intentional homicide. The courtroom was packed for the trial, with townspeople filling every seat, eager to witness the punishment of the monster who had terrorized their community for so many years. Throughout the trial, Gerald insisted on his innocence. He even attempted to fake mental illness, claiming that he heard God's voice and that God told him to do it. However, psychiatric evaluations revealed that he suffered from antisocial personality disorder and sadistic personality disorder. He lacked basic empathy and moral awareness, was fully conscious during his crimes, and was deemed fully criminally responsible. After 3 days of intense deliberation, the jury unanimously found Gerald guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and sent to the maximum security wing of the Arkansas State Prison. When the judge announced the verdict, Aline sat in the gallery as silent tears streamed down her face. It was the first time in 8 years she had felt the sensation of relief. Gerald, however, merely stared coldly at the judge, the corner of his mouth curling into a strange smile, as if the judgment had nothing to do with him. Yet the story did not end there. On May 18, 1988, Gerald died in prison from a drug overdose at the age of just 34. The official prison explanation was accidental overdose of sedatives, but the most widely circulated rumor was that his long history of abusing animals and elders had earned him brutal retaliation from other inmates. Some said he was forced to swallow massive amounts of sleeping pills. Others claimed he was beaten to death and then staged to look like an overdose. Because prison surveillance cameras were malfunctioning at the time, the true cause of his death ultimately became an unsolved mystery. Gerald's death left the Betty's house completely abandoned, but the terrifying rumors surrounding it only grew stronger in the town. The first person to claim he saw something unusual was mailman Tom Wilson. He said that not long after Gerald's death, while delivering mail past the house, he saw a tall, dark figure flash behind a second-floor window. The exact same build as Gerald, but crouched on all fours, its eyes glowing like will-o'-the-wisps. Terrified, Tom dropped his mailbag and pedaled away as fast as he could, never daring to go near Mulberry Street again. Soon after, even more disturbing events followed one after another. Jason, a young man who lived next door to the old house, said that late at night he often heard the sound of chains being dragged across the attic floor, mixed with low, muffled whimpering, sometimes like an animal's agonized howling, sometimes like a human crying. On one occasion, unable to resist his curiosity, he used a pair of binoculars to look more closely and saw the attic window slowly creak open. A shadowy figure, its body covered in thick black hair, leaned out and let out a deep, guttural howl toward the moon. Terrified, Jason moved out of town overnight and never returned. In the summer of 1992, a paranormal investigation team arrived after hearing about the legend, bringing electromagnetic field detectors, thermal imaging cameras, and audio recording equipment as they entered the house. In the attic, they recorded electromagnetic field levels as high as 0.8 milligauss, far above the normal environmental level of 0.1 milligauss. Such strong EM fields are believed to potentially affect the brain's temporal lobe, triggering hallucinations and auditory distortions. Even stranger, the recording equipment captured a faint and unclear audio clip. Against the background of near silence, a man's low whisper could be vaguely heard, "They're all my trophies." In his later report, the team leader, Mark Hansen, wrote, "The old house is filled with intense negative energy, especially in the attic, where people feel overwhelming pressure and fear. The thermal imaging camera once captured a humanoid outline that was 5 degrees Celsius colder than the surrounding environment, despite the absence of any known heat source, but it vanished in an instant." The accompanying psychologist, however, analyzed that many of these paranormal phenomena likely stem from collective memory and psychological suggestion. Gerald's atrocities had left deep trauma in the town, and when people entered a building so saturated with painful memories, they were prone to interpreting environmental sounds and shifts of light and shadow as something supernatural. Yet scientific explanations failed to dispel everyone's doubts. In 2007, the local government planned to demolish the old house, but the proposal met fierce resistance from residents. Some claimed that tearing down the house would release the demons inside, while others believed the building served as a warning about the darkness of human nature. In the end, the house was preserved, surrounded by a wire fence, with a warning sign posted at the entrance: "Danger zone, no entry." Today, more than half a century later, the population of Quitman has grown to 1,200, but the old house at 65 Mulberry Street still stands. Its dark red exterior has deteriorated even further, the window panes long shattered, leaving black, hollow openings that resemble eyes staring silently at the town. Occasionally, curious visitors come to take photos through the fence, but no one dares to step beyond the barrier. The town's elders still tell children the story of the dog boy, not to frighten them, but to remind them that the darkness of human nature often hides behind an ordinary appearance. Tolerance of violence and indifference to the suffering of others will inevitably lead to irreversible tragedy, and that decaying old house stands like a silent monument, etched with the destruction of one family and reflecting a society's past indifference and failure.